Merci, Monsieur le Président. I rise today to speak on motion 46, brought forward by the members for Fredericton, Lincoln, and Tantramar. This motion calls for a moratorium on the current and future development of AI data centers in New Brunswick. Mr. Speaker, this government's approach is different. We believe in thoughtful, deliberate progress. We recognize the importance of carefully assessing every investment to ensure it delivers real economic value, respects our environmental commitments, and builds a stronger future for New Brunswick. That's exactly how we're approaching the issue of data centers. These facilities are essential to Canada's future, particularly in advancing our country's data sovereignty. Right now, much of our data is stored outside of Canada's borders. Building the infrastructure to store and safeguard that data here at home is not only a strategic move, but also a necessary one. Of course, we understand the concerns raised in this debate. As a province, we need to ensure that any proposed project makes sense for New Brunswick, not just today, but for generations to come. As I was working on this speech, actually, I asked staff and I asked folks who work with us, do we not have data centers here in New Brunswick already? And the answer is yes. They're already helping to support research, technology, and institutions right here in New Brunswick. That's why we have a strong system in place to evaluate these projects, including rigorous environmental impact assessments, investment reviews, and opportunity for robust public engagement. These are not rubber stamp processes. They are detailed, data-driven evaluations to ensure high standards are met before any project moves forward. Let me share an example of how we are ensuring responsible growth. Opportunities New Brunswick has been engaged in discussions with Beacon, a Canadian-based hyperscale data center developer, about the possibility of locating a hyperscale AI sovereign data center in New Brunswick's Lorneville Industrial Park. Beacon has been collaborating with VoltaGrid, which specializes in energy storage and microgrid solutions, to provide backup power for data centers like this one. I know questions have been raised about water usage. To put the numbers into perspective, the Beacon data center would initially require the equivalent of the amount of water that would fill the St. John Aquatic Center pool 1.5 times, and that's the opening amount. After that, demand would drop to just 6,500 gallons of water per day, which would be roughly the equivalent of what a 100-seat local restaurant would use, or the amount of water needed to maintain a 2-acre field. These are not about hypothetical figures. It is about real economic opportunities for our communities. Hyperscale data centers represent a new global industry, and it is growing rapidly as the demand for AI and cloud-based technology and digital services continues to accelerate, Mr. Speaker. Digital transformation is critical for businesses of all sizes and across all sectors. Embracing technology is no longer optional. It is foundational to whether businesses can compete, whether workers can become more productive, whether our economy can keep pace with the changes happening all around us. We often talk about technology as if it is only about systems and tools, but it's much more than that. It's a productivity story, and it is a people story. It is about helping people do their jobs more effectively, creating new opportunities for workers and entrepreneurs, and making sure that New Brunswick businesses can grow and compete. I'm going to deviate a little bit from my prepared notes that I wrote up earlier to talk about my travels around New Brunswick. There's a lot of rural development that's happening in New Brunswick where small businesses are leveraging AI solutions to help onboard folks who perhaps were previously unemployed and maybe didn't have the skills to compete 10 years ago in the workforce. It's helping to bring on labor force folks who have been left out because perhaps there's language gaps. Perhaps there's also instances where founders don't have the capacity to get the information to all of the employees they need quickly enough to be able to build their business. And I'm seeing real-life examples as to how this is solving solutions around the province for New Brunswick businesses. Digital transformation and AI are becoming some of the most important levers we have to not only improve productivity, but to keep rural communities and urban communities and their businesses able to compete and adapt in a modern economy. If we're going to use these tools to support businesses, strengthen public services, and grow our economy, then we also need the data infrastructure to support that work right here in Canada. That means sovereign Canadian data infrastructure. It means building the capacity for made-in-Canada solutions so that Canadian businesses, Canadian public services, and Canadian innovators are not always dependent on infrastructure housed outside of our country and governed by laws of another country. This matters for individual companies. It also matters for traditional industries, emerging sectors, and the public services New Brunswickers rely on every day. If we're serious about productivity, if we're serious about growth, if we're serious about protecting Canadian interests, and I would assert Canadian privacy, then we need to be serious about the infrastructure that makes that possible. This should matter to every single member of this House. New Brunswickers use digital platforms every single day to communicate with family, promote small business, share information, participate in public life, and connect with their communities. Much of that activity happens on platforms where data is housed outside of Canada, often in the United States, and governed by American laws. We do not have to assume that this will always be the only model available to us. Building Canadian capacity in sovereign data centers and AI infrastructure creates the foundation for Canadian innovation. Canadian alternatives and future digital tools that are built in Canada, governed in Canada, and aligned with Canadian interests. This is why this discussion is bigger than one project or one industry. This is about whether New Brunswick is prepared to take part in the next generation of economic growth, or whether we are going to let those opportunities happen somewhere else while we continue to talk about the services people need without building the economy required to pay for them. These realities require us to think differently about how we work, how we grow, and how we stay competitive. They require us to be responsible about the decisions we make, the resources we use, and the infrastructure we build. As demand for AI grows, we need the appropriate guardrails around personal and commercial use to ensure that resources are available for the AI solutions that can support public services, strengthen businesses, and create economic opportunities right here in New Brunswick. Hyperscale data centers can drive significant infrastructure investments, create jobs, and open doors to high-growth industries. These projects should be taken seriously, but they should also be reviewed seriously. No one is suggesting that large-scale development should move forward without scrutiny, and that is why New Brunswick already has important processes in place. Potential projects are subject to environmental impact assessment through the Department of Environment and Local Government. On the energy side, NB Power must examine feasibility, system impacts, reliability, and whether a connection can be done responsibly. When Opportunities New Brunswick supports on a project, there also has to be a strong financial and business case. That means there is already rigor in place. There is already a robust environmental review that we can't circumvent and don't want to circumvent, that has significant opportunity for public engagement. There is an energy system review. There is a financial review where public support is being considered. There is also economic analysis. These are the mechanisms that help ensure projects are not approved simply because they sound exciting, but because they meet the standards New Brunswickers should expect. Our environmental impact process is there to make sure this work is done properly, Mr. Speaker. It is there to ensure that the right questions are asked before commitments are made, that development is considered through the lens of environmental responsibility, local impact, energy demand, emissions targets, and long-term public interest. And I've now given myself a little bit of fresh water. New Brunswick can pursue growth and still be responsible, Mr. Speaker. These two things are not in conflict. In fact, responsible growth is exactly what we need if we're going to build a stronger economy while protecting the things that matter most to New Brunswickers. We also have to be honest about where we are starting from. For too long, New Brunswick was left without a clear economic development plan. For 6 years, decisions were made too often on an ad hoc basis. without coordinated strategy needed to strengthen our economy, build resilience, and prepare this province for its long-term growth. When our government came into office October 2024, we knew New Brunswick needed a stronger framework for economic development. We knew we needed a plan, a direction, and a serious focus on growth. That work began early in our mandate and led to the new economic development strategy we have now launched. That matters because New Brunswickers have been given a false choice for too long. They have been told we can expand public services, improve access to programs, and meet the ever-growing need without seeing meaningful economic growth. That's simply not realistic, and it's not fair to the people who are counting on those services. New Brunswickers are telling us every day that they want better health care, they want stronger educational supports, they want better services for seniors, better supports for people with disabilities, and better addiction and mental health supports. They want a social development system that can respond to a changing and aging population. Those services have to be paid for, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the day, someone has to generate the economic activity, create the jobs, grow the wages, make the investments, build the tax base that allows government to deliver the services that New Brunswickers want and need. That is why responsible development matters. If we refuse to take seriously economic opportunities, we are not protecting New Brunswickers. We are limiting what future governments will be able to do for them. The status quo is not enough. If we do not start taking responsible, well-reviewed, large-scale economic opportunities seriously, we risk the cycle of limited growth, limited revenue, and a growing pressure on public services that people rely on. These opportunities are not separate from healthcare, education, social development, or the support we need to deliver to vulnerable New Brunswickers. They are directly connected to our ability to fund and improve those services. A stronger economy gives us more capacity to respond to the needs of people raised with us every day on both sides of the House. Every potential project will still be subject to a detailed review process by the Department of Environment and Local Government, as well as MB Power, as I've previously mentioned. Those mechanisms help ensure that the right conditions are in place before decisions are made, and they allow us to pursue economic growth while protecting the environment, respecting our emissions targets, assessing the energy system, and ensuring development is responsible and forward-looking. We have seen what happens when New Brunswick does not plan for growth. We've seen the consequences of years without a clear economic development plan. And we've seen how that has left our province with a weaker GDP compared to other jurisdictions in North America. That is why our government is committed to responsible growth. We are focused on growth that benefits local businesses, creates jobs, supports families, strengthens communities, and helps to pay for services people need in every corner of this province. New Brunswick has an important role to play in this transition. We have the resources, the talent, the business-friendly environment to take part in Canada's push forward toward sovereign data infrastructure. We are building a stronger, more resilient private sector because that is essential to the province's long-term success. Government has an important role to play in creating the right conditions for businesses to invest, grow, and innovate. We are working towards achieving a 10% GDP growth as part of our economic development strategy. It's not just a number. It's about building capacity for New Brunswickers and making sure our province is not left behind while other jurisdictions move forward. We are not choosing between economic growth and responsible decision-making. We are saying New Brunswick needs both. It is for this reason that we want to continue the conversation. Mr. Speaker, responsible industrial development is extraordinarily important to our province. We have seen what it can mean in other provinces, and New Brunswick cannot stand still while the next generation of investment, technology, and productivity is being built around us. We have the mechanisms in place to ensure development is responsible, environmentally sound, and economically rigorous. Our government is putting the framework in place to take the bold economic steps needed to secure jobs, increase productivity, grow our tax base, and create opportunities here in New Brunswick responsibly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.